Hey beauties, it's your favorite Caribbean cutie, and today I am back with another Testimony Tuesday. Testimony Tuesdays are one of my favorite segments on this channel because I love testimonies. What are testimonies? Testimonies are your personal story, things that happened to you and things that you overcame. So why not share it? Never keep your testimony to yourself because it's your story and the world needs to hear it. Today's Testimony Tuesday is so near and dear to me because this particular testimony, I almost lost my entire life. Girl, I was almost swiped off the entire face of the earth. Back in 2010, I was a freshman in high school. Normal child, normal freshman. I was a part of the cheerleading team, which I absolutely loved. I was a JRTC cadet. What I could really remember is I despised using school restrooms. Till this very day, I hate using public restrooms. I have to force myself to use a public restroom. I just can't deal with the lack of cleanliness. I used to hold my pee all day long. Like, it was ridiculous how long I could hold my pee. I think I could actually break a world record how long I could have held my pee. Because I was holding my urine for an extended amount of time, it resulted in me having a UTI. So my mom took me to the doctor, and the medication that the doctor prescribed was Bactrim. Bactrim is made with sulfa. Bactrim is used to treat a variety of infections. It varies from middle air, respiratory, urine, intestinal infections. So there was 20 pills that I had to take. By the time I took 18, that's when everything started shifting. So this happened a long time ago, but what I can recall is I started feeling really sick. I had flu-like symptoms. I felt very achy. I felt very cold. I felt like I had a head cold. I was still pushing through. I was still going to school like normal, but I knew I wasn't feeling good. I vividly remember a classmate of mine stopped me and she was like, "Zazel, you okay?" And I was just like, girl, I don't know, I don't feel too good. If I had looked like what I felt like, it made sense why her reaction was the way it was. This part I don't really remember, but this is what my mom and my sister brought back to my remembrance. So I started noticing a rash in the palm of my hands and the sole of my feet. So my mom took me back to the doctor that prescribed the medication, made her aware of the rash and I was having flu-like symptoms and what's not. She sent me back home and told me it's just a virus and it'll go away. So apparently that same night, I still wasn't feeling well. So my mom took me to the ER. Got to the ER, all they did was check me out and sent me back home. So this is the second time I was sent home and nobody truly looked into what was going on with me. The next day, I believe, I had a game to cheer at and I just remember I wasn't feeling well that entire day, but still wanted to show up for this game, still pushing through whatever I was feeling, not having a clue that this had anything to do with the medication I was taking. I think it was after the game, I just sat on the bleachers and a friend walked up to me and he said, "You okay? You cold? Like, I'll give you my jacket." Normally I wouldn't take anything from anybody, but I was so freezing cold that day. I was so grateful that he gave me his jacket because it felt like I was literally in an ice box. At this point, my joints felt achy. My whole body was aching from like head to toe. So I believe that same night, my mom took me back to the ER because how bad I was feeling. All they did was administer some IV and sent me back on my way. What they did say was, if it burns when you pee, come back immediately. That was all he said. He didn't say why or anything like that. So we went back home like normal. I don't remember if it was that same night or if it was the following day. But I remember trying to peel off the band-aid where the IV was and my skin came off with it. I mean, like flesh, like I saw pink. So I just took off half of it and the entire skin came off. And I was like, okay, that's different. So I just folded back over because I'm like, I'm not about to take this off. So now I had to pee. And I went to the restroom and I tried to pee and that felt like fire from hell. I stopped in my tracks and I screamed for my mom. And she rushed in the bathroom and she was like, what's going on? I was like, it's burning. She was like, you're lying. I'm like, it is literally burning when I pee. She's like, let's go. So I went, we threw on some clothes and rushed to the ER. At this point, when we got to the ER, it was full per usual, but my mom explained my situation. I don't remember if it was to the same doctor or she explained that we were there maybe the night before, but they took me in a back room and shined a flashlight down my throat and immediately took me to a bed and started hooking me up to IV. At this point, I don't know what's going on. I just know I was feeling awful, to say the least. I felt like a train wreck. I didn't know what was going on because nothing was properly explained. I don't think even to my mom. All I know, it had to be serious because I have been to the emergency room countless times and never before was I rushed ahead of other people in the waiting room. I knew that something serious was going on with me. So my mom called my oldest sister, who was also part of the healthcare industry at the time. She came to the hospital. She was standing outside of the ER and a doctor that knew her by the name of Dr. Dutton, thank God for that lady, saw my sister and she asked her, what are you doing here? My sister told Dr. Dutton, my sister is in the back, she has a rash, she having flu-like symptoms, we don't know what's going on with her. Nobody knows what's going on with her and she just keep getting worse. So Dr. Dutton was like, let me take a look at her. So Dr. Dutton came in the back and I remember her asking me a series of questions. What she was doing was analyzing my case. What medication are you on? How long you been on it? Are you in the sun often? So I answered all her questions. I remember her leaving the room that I was in and came back with this book with all sorts of scary images and said, she has Steven Johnson syndrome. This is a severe case of sunburn. And I was like, a severe case of sunburn? I remember her asking me if I was in the sun. I definitely was because of cheerleading and JROTC. I just want to stop right here and say, please pay attention to the auxiliary labels on your medication bottles. On my medication bottle, clearly stated, avoid sunlight. I don't know how you do that in the Virgin Islands, but it said to do that. And because I was actively in cheerleading and JROTC, I was constantly in the sun. Whether it was for practice, it was PT, platoon lineup, I was always in the sun. And not to mention walking to school, walking home from school, I was constantly exposed to sunlight. So Dr. Dutton showed the images to my mom and sister and told her this is what she has. So at this point, I'm diagnosed with Steven Johnson syndrome. So thank God for Dr. Dutton, because not to mention, Dr. Dutton is a pediatrician. She was literally on her way to the NICU center and saw my sister, asked a question, and came to me. If that's not God, I don't know what is. Because when I tell you nobody else knew what was going on with me, nobody else took the time to figure out what was wrong with me. They just hooked me up to some IV, set me back on my way. Dr. Dutton was the only one that truly analyzed what was going on with me and diagnosed me with Steven Johnson syndrome. My sister immediately started panicking because she was vaguely familiar with Steven Johnson syndrome and she knew how serious this case could actually get. Steven Johnson syndrome is a rare but severe reaction to a medication that affects the mucous membranes that causes the skin to blister and completely peel off. Dr. Dutton showed my mother exactly what stage I was at and what was going to take place rapidly. And when I say rapidly, I mean rapidly. Like in the snap of a finger. So there's a series of things that happen to the body sequentially when you have Stevens-Johnson syndrome. It starts out with flu-like symptoms / fever. Then you start to get a purplish rash. Then the skin begins to blister. The blisters then pop and completely peels off, causing skin erosions that resemble severe hot water burns. So Dr. Dotson explains to my mother, everything that you're seeing right now has already taken place on the inside of her body. She's literally burning from the inside out. Not to mention, my skin started to feel like when you have sunburn and you touch it and it stings and it burns. That's what I started to feel like. The rashes started to get bigger and they looked purple. So Dr. Dutton emphasized that I needed to leave that island that night. As you already probably concluded, healthcare in the Virgin Islands is subpar. Dr. Dutton was like, this hospital is not equipped for what she needs to stay alive. She said she needs to be airlifted to a hospital that has a burnt unit because she's gonna need to be treated as a burnt patient. She wanted me to go to Jackson Memorial Hospital because they had an excellent burnt unit. However, my mother had MASA, which stands for Medical Air Service Association, aka Air Ambulance, which I also want to encourage every viewer. If you don't already have MASA, I think you definitely should get it just in case of any emergencies that you need to be airlifted anywhere, your family needs to be airlifted, you will have that coverage and you don't have to pay out of pocket. Apparently, MASA upgraded their program to certain regions, and the only region that my mother apparently had was to go to Puerto Rico. Dr. Dutton was like, if she goes to Puerto Rico, she's gonna die. If she stays here, she's gonna die. Y'all need to get her in Miami. This lady in the hospital started pulling strings. She was able to coordinate a jet going to Jackson Memorial Hospital. Again, favor from the Lord, because that wasn't covered under my mother's MASA. So literally this lady did whatever she could in her favor to get me on the next flight to Miami, Florida. So God has been showing up and showing out from the beginning of this entire situation. So at this point, everything was finalized. It was official that I would be airlifted to Jackson Memorial Hospital that very night. My mom called family, friends to say their goodbyes before we head out. I remember, okay, this part I get a little bit emotional, because I remember my mom saying, Z, ask God to forgive you of all your sins. And although my mother wasn't the most affectionate, she always did certain things that I knew that she loved me a whole lot. That was one of those things for me, because what that tells me is you don't even know if your daughter is going to make it or not. But if you ask God to forgive you for your sins, she knew that I had a chance to go to heaven. I really did appreciate that, and it just reminds me of the scripture Proverbs 22:6. Raise up a child in the way that they should go, and when they get older, they will not depart from it. My mom didn't raise me up in evil. She raised me to love the Lord. Look at me today. So she called our pastor at the time and she requested prayer. She informed him that my daughter is going to be airlifted. She told me that he said, your daughter is going to come back. And I think since that moment, my mom displayed incredible faith. It's literally indescribable how much faith she had. Whereas my sister on the other end was distraught, in total distress, because she's like, I know what could happen. Only one person was able to get on the jet with me, and of course that would be my mom. So my sister was so dedicated to me and this whole situation. She was like, I don't care if I lose my job. She was on the next flight to Miami, Florida the next day. So I remember friends and family came and told me bye, and I don't remember vividly everything what they said, but I do remember feeling so loved in that moment because of how many people came and saw me. And I had an aunt, she's deceased now, but she said to me, you see how much people love you? And I remember when she died, I was like, I wish I could have told her, like, you see how much people love you? because so many people showed up for her funeral, and I was just like, if I could only tell her the same thing, like, do you see how much people love you, girl? My Aunt Cicely was like the star of our family. Like, so many people came from near and far just to support her and celebrate her life. And I just remember in that voice, she said, you see how much people love you? And I really did feel love, and I really wish that I could have told her that. So give people their flowers while they're alive. So I think after all the family members and friends left, I was so exhausted. I was in pain, I was tired. They had came and put the catheter in because obviously I couldn't urinate on my own. I just felt like I was just going through it. I really just wanted to go to sleep, but I was afraid that I wasn't gonna wake up. I didn't express this, but my mom obviously could have tell that I was tired, and she said, are you sleepy? And I was like, yeah. She said, you afraid to go to sleep? And I said, yeah. And she said, it's gonna be okay, go to sleep. And I just felt so safe. Like, I was so tired. When I tell you I was so scared to go to sleep, I really thought that once I slept, I was gonna wake up in a whole different place and it was not gonna be Earth. When my mom told me to go to sleep, I felt so safe. I trusted her word. After that, girl, I was knocked out. Not to mention, they came and pumped me up with so much drugs. After that, the only thing that I could remember was being in the air ambulance. I think at that time we had arrived on the ceiling of Jackson Memorial Hospital. All I remember was seeing like lights. I know I was on the gurney because I was laid flat and I started opening my eyes, and my mom just tapped me and said, go back to sleep, go back to sleep. By the time I went back to sleep, I woke up in a whole different environment again. This time I was in the pediatric ICU in Jackson Memorial Hospital. At this point, they labeled my case as TEN, which stands for toxic epidermal necrolysis. Stevens-Johnson syndrome is when 10 to 29% of your body is affected, and TEN is when 30 or more of your body is affected. In my case, 100% of my body was affected. 10% of people die in Stevens-Johnson syndrome cases, and 50% die in toxic epidermal necrolysis cases. So at this point, I stopped speaking. I don't remember much of anything. A lot of what I'm saying is what was recalled by both my mom and my sister. At this stage, many people lose their eyesight. So that was a major concern of the doctors. They had eye doctors come in and treat my eyes with medication daily. They put me on a burnt bed, which is designed for patients that suffer severe burns across large portions of their body. At this point, my burns were 2nd and 3rd degree burns. The rashes had already started turning into blisters. As the days went by, the blisters popped, started sloughing off. There was a lot of raw skin on my body, especially where I was laying down. So I remember for sure my buttocks, my cheeks was pink. I was drugged up most of the time. So I only could recall only sometimes like opening my eyes and kind of being somewhat aware of what's going on. Also at this point, the PICC line was attached, feeding tube was inserted, I already had in the catheter. Girl, I was hooked up to so many things. It was just a lot. So I do remember opening my eyes and kind of seeing what they're doing. And I just remember like a big, huge blister on my thigh. I mean, it was as big as a bowling ball. It was just so big, it was traumatizing. They would come in and they would sop me down with silver nitrate, which is a solution used to treat burns and reduce the risk of infections. There was a particular medication that I needed to stay alive, and I remember what they looked like. I don't know the name, but St. Thomas had bottles maybe this small, and Dr. Dutton had already started me on it before I left the island. In the States, they had vials at least like this big, maybe like 30-ounce bottles. And my insurance denied using that medication on me because they didn't want to pay for it. Each bottle cost about $48,000, and I was on that 24 hours a day around the clock. So they kept denying it until a particular doctor called and was like, if she's not on this, she is going to die. Then they let up and they decided they'll go ahead and honor it. Even nurses hated handling this vial because of how valuable it was. Like I mentioned, at this stage, people go blind. So I remember doctors coming in every day. I don't remember what they were doing, but they were putting something in my eyes each and every day. I really couldn't see. I remember being able to see colors and movement. My vision went totally blurry. I couldn't barely see my mom's face, barely see my sister's face. It was just, everything was blurry. They were very diligent about having doctors come in each and every day, monitoring my vision. They didn't allow my family to take pictures of me because from my remembrance, they wanted to avoid anybody being sued. Doctors are gonna look out for doctors, which I understand. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a picture of me in the intensive care unit when I was going through this particular stage of Stevens-Johnson syndrome, or toxic epidermal necrolysis. I also had a fever each and every day. I remember that being so torturous to my body because I was going through so much. They were doing so much to my body every day. I was constantly cold. They sopped me down with silver nitrate, which is a liquid. They would sop me down with cold water to break the fever every single night. I remember at this point, I was sad. I was kind of coming back to some type of consciousness, and I was really sad because, like I said, it was a lot going on to my body. They would be twisting me, turning me, sopping me down. My butt was hurting because it was nothing but flesh back there. It was just so much. Like, it was just really a lot on me. I spent 3 weeks in the intensive care unit, and on the 4th week, they transferred me to the recovery unit. So at this point, what I remember is a lot more family members came to see me in the recovery unit. And oh my gosh, like, family was so emotional because what I had left St. Thomas looking like, I had looked completely opposite when they came and saw me. I just looked like somebody that went through a fire. My skin was just peeling off. My lips had a lot of scabs on it. I still have like some scars that I could insert a picture here to show you guys that it still looks like that. You could kind of see how it was, but it was a lot of scabs because all the skin sloughed off of my all the skin came off of my lips, the tip of my ears, eyelids, fingernails, toenails, all of those came off. My entire palms, the skin came off. Basically, what you're looking at right now is brand new skin. Like I mentioned, 100% of my skin was affected, so this is all new skin. So I still had the feeding tube in. There was still a lot that I was limited to. And when I say 100% of my body was affected, I'm including private areas too. Just imagine how painful that was. So I was still limited. I couldn't take showers as often. I only was able to wipe off because the skin was just peeling, and they encouraged me not to peel it off or anything, just let it drop off on its own. So the most I could do was like sop myself down. I remember my other sister coming to see me. She immediately started crying. My dad came. He was hardly even in the door. He just started crying. Everybody was just emotional. It was just bad. But in our eyes, myself, my mother, and my oldest sister were like, this is not even the worst of it. This is the recovery here. So if you're emotional now, you would have probably passed out if you saw her in the ICU. My sister came with a huge envelope of so much love from my classmates and teachers and friends in high school, and it was filled with so much love. It made me so emotional because it's sad that you only know how loved you are when something tragic happens to you, or unfortunately some people never get to witness the love because they pass away. And I was able to see how much love, I knew that people liked me. I think I was pretty adored in high school. Man, the love was tremendous because it was just selfless. They literally went out their way to make me feel special, to let me know that I'm in their thoughts and prayers, and so much love. It was overwhelming, to say the least. My sister and I watched a movie. That was my first time watching 17 Again with Zac Efron. And girl, that thing made us laugh so hard. Literally, I laughed till my lips started profusely bleeding. I think I had break one of the scabs or something and my lips were just bleeding. But I didn't care. I was so happy to have my sister near me. I was so happy to laugh again. Every night before we go to sleep, I remember my mom leaving the TV on TBN. My sleeping schedule was all the way jacked up, so I was awake while everybody was asleep. And I remember this lady, oh my gosh, I don't remember her name at the time, but if you watch TBN, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. Caucasian lady with the big hair, dramatic makeup. And she said, if you would like to give your life to Christ, just say this prayer. And I remember just repeating the prayer, and I invited Jesus into my heart that night. I honestly didn't even know how big of a deal that was. I just did it. If I did give my life to Christ prior to that day, I don't recall. It was either probably because my mom made me, maybe the church made me, I don't know. If it was so, it wasn't willing. That night, it was my decision solely. I'm grateful to God for giving me that opportunity, because where would my destination had been had Steven Johnson or 10 take me out? I don't know where I would have been. So God gave me another chance at life, and I was able to accept him in my heart. And I thank my mother for being the woman of God that she is. She left that on the television just for me to hear. God knew that I was gonna accept him into my heart. So I was so grateful for that. Years later, I only spent 1 week in the recovery unit. When I say it shocked doctors, they literally called me a miracle. They said people either die in these cases or they are in the hospital for a long, extended period of time. Only 1 to 2 people in every million are affected by Steven Johnson syndrome or toxic epidermal necrolysis. Imagine the odds that I was one of those people in that million. I am literally a walking miracle. I am literally a walking testimony. Doctors said it themselves. People don't leave the hospital this early. This is literally a miracle. Years later, what the Lord revealed to me was I was never supposed to make it off of that plane alive. I had to fight mentally to stay alive. Recovery took time for me, physically, mentally. I eventually needed therapy because I had to avoid the sun, and going back to the Virgin Islands, we're sunny all year round. So like I said initially, how do you avoid sunlight in the United States Virgin Islands? The blisters would have reoccurred if I was exposed to too much sunlight. I remember one day my family and I went to have breakfast, and it was one of my first outings after coming out of the hospital, and I literally was in that parking lot crying because I was afraid to get out of the car. Dr. Dutton suggested therapy, and so I started therapy, and I was in that for a little bit. I couldn't return to school that same year, of course, otherwise I would have needed sunglasses because my eyes also couldn't be exposed to too much sunlight. I had to use artificial tears every day to keep moisture in my eyes. So they just suggested that I continue school online and return to school the following year. I became very self-conscious of my skin because I looked different. Luckily, my entire face wasn't affected, but my neck all the way down was different. I was multi-toned toned. I just wasn't the same person. So I had to get used to that. I had to be more comfortable in wearing clothes that exposed most of my skin. Before I just started hiding my skin, so I would wear a lot of long sleeve, but you could still kind of see it on my neck, but I was more comfortable with just the neck showing opposed to like my entire skin. Plus the long sleeve was also to protect my skin from the sun as well. I also still have some parts of my body that reminds me of Steven Johnson syndrome, and I'm appreciative of it because it reminds me to always be grateful to God for my life. On my upper thigh I have 2 little dots. It was from stitches because when I was in the ICU, they came and snipped my skin and tested it. And I didn't know I had stitches until I was in the recovery unit. I was like, what is that? My mom was like, oh yeah, they came and took some of your skin to send to the lab. I was like, okay. So I still have that. I still have the pick line scar right here. Then on the inside of my lip is pretty much like black and pink from the scabs and what's not. Recovery definitely took time. My skin took some years before it got to this point, even tone. But I definitely became more comfortable in who I am and what my story was. My family made that easy for me as well. My sister always reassured me, you look beautiful. You look even more beautiful than you were before Steven Johnson syndrome. I became who I am. I just want to say that we serve a mighty, mighty God. God never left nor forsake me throughout this entire process. He allows things to happen to people because testimonies save lives. And this is why I love giving testimonies on my channel. I will forever do this unless God says otherwise. There's a lot that you can walk away with from this one testimony. You might have not been affected by Steven Johnson syndrome, but you might have been in a tragic accident or any type of tragedy. Just recall what God did for you. If it wasn't for Dr. Dotton, I would have been in Roy Lester Snyder emergency room, undiagnosed, and probably died that same night. But God sent her and she was obedient. If it wasn't for the lady to coordinate and work what she could in her favor to get me on a flight to Jackson Memorial Hospital, again, I could have been dead. There would have been no iamzazel YouTube channel. Who is she? Who is she? I would have been long gone if it wasn't for God orchestrating everything. But I had to go through that for somebody else. I had to go through that for you who's watching. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being a willing vessel for the Lord. I am a peculiar people. I am willing to go through it for God. Now God, I'm not implying anything else. I'm not. But that I'm willing and I'm grateful that I could be sitting here speaking to you alive and well and beautiful and survive Steven Johnson and TEN. So I just want to say God is faithful. Whether you know it, whether you feel it, you are his child and he loves us all. There is purpose for you just as much as there's purpose for me. Not one of us were created without a purpose in this earth. What is your purpose? I challenge you to ask the Lord, what is your purpose? What are you here for? Everybody's story is different. Everybody's why is different. Everybody's testimony is different. And no longer keep it to yourself because that's not beneficial to anyone. Please remember to stay in repentance because the kingdom of God is near and he is coming back for a church that is spotless. I thank you guys so much for watching this video and please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel because we are going places. We are helping people. So I thank you all and I love you guys. I also would like to take this time out to mention Ronald McDonald House. Ronald McDonald House is a non-profit organization that is also a housing assistance for people with children in the hospital for extended periods of time. Ronald McDonald was a blessing to my family. While I was in the hospital, my family was able to stay there for $50 or under a night, opposed to a hotel in Miami, you would be looking at $150 plus per night. It's also walking distance to Jackson Memorial Hospital. They only require the minimum from you, which is to just do small house chores. They do ask for donations, and I want to encourage you to donate right after this video. You could go on the Ronald McDonald website, how to give. Everything that they are in need of at this moment, they will have listed. You could give financially, or you could donate any type of products that they are asking for. My family donated things like bed in a bag, towels, cleaning products. Anything will be a help. Do whatever you can, give whatever you can give or is on your heart to Ronald McDonald House, because they are so beneficial to so many families. I am forever grateful to Ronald McDonald House because of what they did for my family when I was going through a very traumatic time in my life. So please take the time to visit their website, see if there's a Ronald McDonald near you, wherever you are in the world, and even consider volunteering. I have started volunteering here in Dallas, Texas, and it has been a great experience and a great way to give back what they have done for me. God bless you. Bye-bye.